Hello, today we're going to talk about factors affecting the process of transpiration in plants. Now, just as a quick recap, you will remember that transpiration is when we have the evaporation of water from the leaves of the plant, and this is very useful because when water evaporates, it draws more water in from the soil and keeps a flow of water going through the plant. Now, water is really important in plants because it does a whole variety of things. And we can go through a few of those now. So the first thing that might come to mind is this idea of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is how a plant makes its own food, so very important. A second reason is that water keeps the cells in the plant turgid. That's packed full and tight full of water, so it helps to keep the plant upright. As water moves through the plant, through the xylem tissue, it transports minerals to the places needed in the plants. And this is important not just for plants, but for all living things. All chemical reactions take place in solution. In other words, the chemicals are dissolved in water. So for that reason, water is very important as well. There are one or two other reasons as well, but those are kind of the main ones. Now, what we're going to do is just take a little detailed look at the cross section of a leaf and what it would look like under a microscope. So if we just pulled that small section out there, enlarged it, we have something that looks like this. We've met this in a previous video, so we won't go into the details now, but water moves from the transport tissue into the cells, as you can see, and then that water can evaporate into the air spaces in between those mesophyll cells. So we tend to have quite a high concentration of water particles that have evaporated away from those cells. On the outside, there tends to be a lower concentration of water particles. So what we say is that the inside has a higher concentration of water particles compared to the outside. So we've got a higher concentration on the inside, and on the outside, we'll have a lower concentration. And if that's the case, what's going to happen is that water is going to exit through those pores that are called stomata, or one is called a stoma, but many are called stomata. And we have that through the process of diffusion. So the water moves out through the process of diffusion. We say there is a concentration gradient between the inside and the outside of the leaf. We can now look at the factors that affect the rate of transpiration and in fact affect the rate of water leaving or exiting the leaves. And those factors are those you can see on the screen. Now we need to be able to explain why those factors affect transpiration. So we've got the four key ones there. We're going to start off with light and go through them one by one. So in terms of light, a higher light intensity means more transpiration. Now this is not the explanation, this is a description of the effect of light intensity. We need to be able to explain why. So the difference between explain and describe is that with explain you have to say why something is or why something is happening. So in terms of our light intensity, when we have a higher light intensity, in other words when the light is brighter, the structures that we've talked about already, the stomata on the underside of the leaf there, they tend to be open, or more of them tend to be open. And when we have more stomata open, that means there is more carbon dioxide that can go into the leaf for photosynthesis, and more oxygen can leave or exit the leaf because that's a waste product of photosynthesis. But as a result of that, we also get more water exiting the leaf as well by the process of diffusion, and therefore that impacts the whole process of transpiration. There we go, more diffusion of water particles. Now, in terms of the wind, the effect of the wind is that if we have more wind or more air movement, we're going to get a higher rate of transpiration. So more wind leads to more transpiration, and we need to remind ourselves of part of the cross section of the leaf there. So if we expand this section here, or just cut that section out and take a look, we can help to explain why wind causes higher transpiration. So we've got the water particles on the inside as we described below, a lower concentration on the outside perhaps, but if we have wind, the low concentration or the low amount of water particles on the outside will be blown away, so they'll be removed. And once we do that, we will decrease the concentration of water particles on the outside of the leaf even further. So the wind actually removes the particles that are close to the underside of the leaf there. That's going to increase our concentration gradient, and then we're going to get more diffusion of water particles away from the leaf, and therefore we're going to get a higher rate of transpiration. So there we go, more wind, more transpiration for the reasons explained there. Now, in terms of our temperature, the higher the temperature, the higher the rate of transpiration. So we need to again be able to explain why this is. Now, anytime we have a higher temperature and we're talking about evaporation of water, it kind of makes sense that the higher the temperature, the more evaporation. And that's exactly the same reason for our leaves. We have more evaporation from the mesophyll cells that we saw in our other diagram. And therefore, we're going to get a higher concentration of particles on the inside. So if we just use that diagram there, more evaporation means more particles in that airspace, and therefore a higher concentration gradient, and therefore more diffusion of those water particles out of the leaf. Okay, so the temperature affects transpiration in that way. We might also want to make a note that the reason why we get more evaporation is because particles gain kinetic energy. They gain more kinetic energy. Ke stands for kinetic energy, and that makes them more able to escape from the liquid form and escape as individual particles, and therefore you get more evaporation. Okay, so in terms of our humidity, if we've got a high humidity, this will decrease the rate of transpiration. So what do we mean by humidity? Well, we can again use our part of our leaf diagram there. We've got our water particles on the inside as before, but if we've got air with high humidity, that means there are a lot of water particles in the air. Now, technically, you could say that it's humid inside the leaf because there's lots of particles evaporated in that space there, and that would be correct as well. But if we've got humid air on the outside, that means we've only got a slightly lower concentration of water particles in the air on the outside. Therefore, we're going to get less diffusion of those particles. So a high humidity will decrease the rate of transpiration because we lower the concentration gradient between the inside and the outside of the leaf. So those are the 4 factors that we need to be able to describe and explain in terms of how they affect transpiration. And it's probably a good idea to make a note of those so that you can look back when you need to. But in the next video, we're going to look at how we can measure the rate of transpiration and do experiments on the rate of transpiration. But for now, from me, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.